Do we have the roll call? Whoop, wait a sec. We have the roll call, Brian?
I'm not in yet. There it is, got it, okay, we're good.
Okay, we have a quorum. Have a motion to approve the agenda.
So move.
Second.
Call. May we proceed, Brian, or are we waiting for?
Yes. There's 4 yeses up there now, there we go.
All right. Deb, will you read the mission statement, please?
The mission statement of the Brookings School District is as follows. The Brookings School District prepares all learners to be confident, engaged citizens, empowered to impact the ever-changing and interconnected world.
Do we have any conflict of interest, Clint?
We do not have any to present at this time.
Okay, Brookings High School.
Well, just for the sake of those that are viewing at home and in the audience this evening, previous school board meeting, there was a brief, just a conceptual overview of what has been discussed recently at the high school, and this work session is predominantly focused on conversation about some of those developments occurring and being discussed and reviewed at the high school right now. And the team of teachers and staff members with some community input that have been involved in that entire process. And also you'll notice there's an additional presentation this evening highlighting some of the discussion and dialogue about alternative learning opportunities for students as well. So this evening, as you see, Dr. Jensen is here with Dr. Von Fisher to highlight these 2 items, and I think they have a lot to talk about this evening.
Well, I'll start. I will lead the first part of our conversation tonight, and Dr. Jensen will wrap it up. As we were here 2 weeks ago, a little over 2 weeks ago, and I appreciated the interest that I perceived from the Board of Education to talk about some of the important issues that we're working with at the high school. I also would urge anyone who's watching this, I plan to send this out tomorrow to our parents at the high school, and am hopeful that they will watch and gain some knowledge and some information about some of the why. It's easy to hear the what, but I think the why part of this conversation is very important because change is never easy. And when we look at things that work well, and we are a good school district, we are a very good school district, and I think that even in the midst of that, there are things that we can improve and do better. And that is where this conversation kind of begins. I would hate to be redundant, but I do want to touch on, at least very, very briefly, some of the things that we talked about 2 weeks ago, just to refresh memory. And so I'll go through those rather quickly, and then there are additional slides afterward that followed the teaser that I was able to present earlier in January. So to talk through briefly the operating environment that Brookings High School and all our schools are operating within, but more specifically Brookings High School, the education reform discussion, the nation at risk, the conversations about are schools really doing what they should be doing. That started in the 80s, even earlier, and that has resulted truly, I think, in the accountability world we live in right now. And with No Child Left Behind and Every Student Shall Succeed, and just overall accountability and the questions that our community and our nation have about education in general. Additionally, compulsory attendance changed from 16 years to 18 years of age, so that previously students with 16 or 17 could drop out of school with parents agreeing to that. And our state made that a law that you had to stay in school till you're 18, and it is a good thing. I don't want anyone to think that I don't believe it to be a good thing, but it does challenge us to keep students in our buildings that previously weren't part of our building. In addition, we have a pullback, I would say, in some of what I think school leaders would say was the support of the judicial system in response to events, some things that had happened in our communities. And now our students who previously would be removed and maybe go through some education and some work and eventually come back, now are staying in our system, in our schools, and it has changed the way we interact with our schools. It has changed our school culture to some degree. Dr. Jensen will talk more about that, I'm sure, too, and that affects our some of the things we're going to talk about. There's in South Dakota also a CTE or Career and Tech Ed emphasis, and that is something that I see continuing. The governor's week of work coming up in April is something that we're participating in, and that's just one example of the things that we will continue to do, and some of the things that you'll see tonight deal with that career emphasis. And I don't want anyone to walk away thinking that we are changing from being it's either or. Are we no longer academically emphasizing what we do at Brookings High School? Absolutely not. That is at the forefront. But I think bringing that career piece in to the conversation is something we haven't done as intentionally as we are trying to do now. Finally, on this slide, we've got graduation requirements that have changed. July 2018, there were some changes to graduation requirements and career endorsements. Advanced endorsements is the term, and we'll talk through that a little bit too later on. Additionally, within our district, now going from south to the nation to South Dakota to our district, we are a district that is continuing to improve our continuous improvement. And so that's something that we, I think, are adopting and working hard to continue. Search survey, this is something that our students, I think we went grades 6, 9, 12 with a survey, and we'll continue to do that into the future. Every 3 years, I believe, we have that survey, and just to track what's happening within our community, and then that is compared to what's happening around the nation, and we get some good data from that. Some of those things that we've seen are alarming, and that makes us really wonder what is changing with our student population. How does that affect? Mental health is a very large concern that we have. Students finding the support that they need in their own worlds is a concern for us generally, because that affects what we do at our school. How is BHS? The environment we live in, we have had a history of consistently high ACT scores, and that is a great thing. We've done very well. I believe we have the highest average in the state. That's something to be proud of. And our students work hard to have that happen. But that's one of the things that is in our environment. That's where we live. We have a reputation because of that, and with that as a very good college prep school. Lastly, here on this one, we have, for the last 10, 15 years, had or tried to create an environment of freedom and responsibility. I think it makes sense to allow some opportunities for students to try some things within an environment of safety, where if they go down a path they shouldn't, we're there to kind of pull them back and say, no, I think you need to do it this way. And that doesn't happen. Students don't have to make any choices if there aren't any choices to make. And so that's where we offer some of those opportunities for students to make some choices, and then are there to help them when and if they need some redirection. So with all that in mind, and thinking about what kind of world we live in, I'm sure there are many other pieces that I could have added to our environment. There is, what are we going to do about that? Well, we started, when we heard about the graduation requirement change that came from the state of South Dakota, it opened up a door for us. There were some things that we had already been working on and looking at with our continuous improvement process, being critical of ourselves to some extent, to what we do. Why are we doing that? Is it because we've always done it? Is this really good for our students? Is this good for us? We opened up a career pathways task force, or began the task force, looking at what student skills are, their abilities, their experiences, relevance. How do we work with that? That was a group of teachers. We had students on that task force. We had community members, industry partners, and that was probably one of the bigger events that I've been involved with at the high school level, and it was very successful. I think we got some good work from that task force. We also worked to create some site visit opportunities for that team, as well as other groups of staff and students that have wanted to look at what's happening in other areas, what's working in other areas. We are working in a MCL, or mass customized learning. How does that work in our district? And we are preparing for students to arrive in 23, 24 who have experience in that MCL environment. They're currently sixth graders at Mickelson Middle School. And that structural rebuild committee is something that we worked at not only as a district, but also specifically in our high school. We are also through and this is interesting because the MCL conversation dealt with the 16 habits of mind, and does at the elementary levels. And as we were in the Pathways group, looking at the skills, abilities of our students that we wanted them to have when they left, we had Post-its all over the place about all these skills and abilities. And when we brought those together and kind of compared them with these 16 habits of mind that the elementary schools are already using, we realized that all of these things that we want our students to do are part of this 16 habits of mind conversation. So it really worked well to then pull into the high school our goal of truly implementing the 16 habits of mind within our day-to-day operations at the high school. But that was something else that we saw in that process. Smarter Balance scores designated us as a targeted service school, and that created a need for us to have a comprehensive needs assessment with the state of South Dakota, which included a root cause analysis. That was a fantastic opportunity. Dr. Jensen and I will be part of a team that will be presenting in March at the State Administrator Convention or Conference, and I'm looking forward to helping others see what a great opportunity that was, rather than I remember being part of that first run through with the No Child Left Behind. I know that the goal was to improve, but the process didn't align well to what we were, wanting to do, or something that was more than just a book on a shelf. I think we're going to really come up with some good ending outcomes, especially as it landed with all these other things that we were trying to work on. So common themes and takeaways, career pathways. How can we help ensure that we're really talking about careers? And not because all paths lead to a career. Not all paths go to college, not all paths go to tech school or military or straight to work, but everybody has that end game of being in a career, and how can we help that be more of a conversation at the high school without taking away from the things that we're already doing. Alternative school, I think I mentioned this too, every place that we've gone. Alternative school is where it's at, and Dr. Jensen will be talking about that in a lot more detail here after I'm done. Engagement is a concern. Students are less and less engaged in what's happening here. I brought up the book study that we had and the read that we did, and the comparison that Netflix competes with sleep. And that's an interesting thought, and so are we to compare our engagement levels to Netflix at the high school. It makes me nervous. It's an opportunity for sure, but it's a difficult challenge for us. We've seen changes in student behavior and learning styles, significant changes, I would say, in the last 8 to 10 years, and this is my 17th in the district, and so the significant difference in what we're seeing as far as learning styles and student behaviors. And we talked about that spectrum of do it because I said you do it, and I can't stop doing it because it's the most enjoyable thing I've ever done. And when we're talking about classroom expectations of teachers, not everything's going to be the most enjoyable thing you've ever done. And so what is the expectation that students have of us, that we have of ourselves? What's the expectation that our parents and community members have of the school? I think those are some legitimate questions and conversations we still need to have. Communication came up, especially when we had our a comprehensive needs assessment and did our, excuse me, and had the opportunity to have a root cause analysis and really kind of get to the bottom of what some of the issues are that we are having. And communication, setting of expectations, those are all things that can cause some problems internally as well as with a conversation with community. And then mental health. We talked about it earlier, that idea that students are struggling at a rate that we've honestly never seen before. The counselors are struggling to keep up with the demand for their need in that realm. And then lastly, time for intervention. The increase of, I think to some extent, the increase of the customization that's happening in society allows or maybe puts that belief, that need, that everyone gets their own time to ask their own questions, and it's valid, but we're short on that time. How do we find that time within the classroom? With students saying, "I need to get a ride home right after school," or "I'm in an activity," or watch a younger sibling, or "I can't get there in the morning because I ride the bus. I've got 7 classes. I don't have a study hall or flex period." And so it really gets difficult for us to find that time to have those small group and individual interactions. So this is where I left us before, was at the end here to say, there it is. This is where we are. And again, I would remind anyone who's watching, this was a really brief blitz, and I did a little bit more work that last time on the 13th. So if you wanted to watch that, please go ahead and do that. But from a moving from here perspective, where do we go? And I think this is where we're going to lay down some of the pieces that are proposed at this time. And there are 3 of these pieces. One is career pathways. And when we look at what we want to do, how do we implement something that will help our students keep their eye on the prize? It's not just what's after high school, although that is important, but what is our goal long term, and how do my skills and abilities and experiences lead me to whatever it is I'm going to do with a large percent of my adult life. And that is, you can see up here on the slide, the goal we would have is to implement a freshman academy. So we will have a team of mostly ninth grade teachers and bring them together periodically to discuss discuss what's working, what's not working with our students. Similar, but not to the same degree that the middle school has some teaming going on. That is a really supportive network, and we like that idea. I think at this point with the Freshman Academy, bringing that group of teachers in could be helpful for our students and maybe help us support them to a greater degree. Freshman English has agreed and is already working on adopting careers as a focus for discussion and a place of delivery for career stuff. There's a lot to know, there's a lot to learn. And so that is a goal that we have. Thomas Moudry and Alyssa Loffman are working with our career advisor, with Mrs. Dunbar, our CTE coordinator, and with counselors. Counselors go to school to know what to do and how to bring careers forward in students' lives, and having them part of that team is, I think we're on the right track. I think we're getting there. We've done a good job, I think, with registration, but I think we could improve our process and make it even more closely aligned with that career pathways conversation. Additionally, a goal that we have is to, at the end of the freshman year, have students make some choices, assisted by some of the work they've already done, looking at their data. What are some of the areas that they have tendencies toward, and putting students into advisories at that point for the following year, sophomore, junior, senior, in advisories that are more closely aligned to their beliefs about themselves and their future. One of the things that we talked about at a recent meeting was how do we do that without raising anxiety levels? Is our goal to make students choose their individual career and stick with it when they are 8th graders? Well, no. But they have to make a choice before they're 9th graders. Well, yes. But by then, I think students will know if they like working with ideas, do they like working with people, are they, what are their tendencies? Again, skills, abilities, experiences, and how can we assess and grow their skills, and then also how can we increase their number and extent of experiences? Because Dr. Willert once said, and has said quite often, you will choose from the list of things you know. And if they don't know it or haven't seen it, then they're less likely to choose it, even if it's something that they might end up wanting in the long run. So how do we do that? Balancing that anxiety. We don't want to raise anyone's anxiety levels, but we also think that we could really be a lot more helpful in a little more focused groups at that level with advisories. And that'll be a weekly meeting, and we can channel and insert, inject some good career information at that time. So that's career pathways. Look at graduation requirements. It's going to happen because the state says it's going to happen. In addition to that, I think that it opens up some interesting opportunities that I think a lot of our students are going to be excited about, and parents. So really what it comes down to is they're all called advance endorsements, all 3 of them. And so students upon graduation will have listed on their transcript 1 or 2 or 3, all of them potentially, advance endorsements that they have qualified for or attained. So advance endorsement is the equivalent to the current graduation requirement. So at this point, what we do is we default students into that category. When we were looking at our Infinite Campus system today, 8th grade students who are going to be 9th graders next year, they defaulted into advanced endorsement because that is that kind of standard graduation requirement. There are 2 that are new now, the advanced career endorsement and the advanced honors endorsement. So if a student were, and I don't mean to oversimplify, so hopefully this is not the only place people will get information about the advanced endorsements, But advanced career endorsements, a student would need 2 full credits from the same career cluster. And I believe they would also need a NCRC score, which is a qualifying for a kind of a work ACT, for lack of a better term. And they would also need a industry certification, I believe. And so that would allow a student to receive the advanced career endorsement. And then a student could also, or instead, receive the advanced honors endorsement, which is equivalent to the opportunity scholarship. So those are some things that will be listed for the graduates of the 2021 school year. With this, and this is kind of another teaser for upcoming events, I would say, is that I will be presenting that graduation requirement to the board for official adoption prior to the beginning of that next school year. Previously, when the Board of Education, the State Board of Education, would implement graduation changes, they would say for this year's 8th graders, let's say, and then everyone else will graduate with a different standard or a different requirement. That is not the case with this requirement, and we could have adopted this as of, upon its implementation at the start of the 18-19 school year. And so we will be in line with the state at their requirement for us, but we didn't adopt that any earlier, and it does affect next year's seniors. And so currently, if nothing else happens, seniors will graduate with an advanced endorsement. And so those are some conversations that are a little complicated to have. We don't have that in place yet, to have those conversations with students and or parents, because that's a new event. And usually, these types of things would allow students to create a 4-year plan that would allow for those things to happen. And when this kind of, I would say maybe abruptly, begins for our current juniors, next year seniors, it's a little more difficult for them to align themselves to get all of these endorsements. I did have one question regarding this, and I did not have an answer. What does that mean? What does an endorsement do? Who's going to be looking and seeing what that looks like? And I think what the state is doing is creating a transcript edition and looking for an audience. And I think it will come. I think that there will be maybe higher ed institutions, maybe employers, really taking a look at these transcripts when students graduate.
Dr. Van Fisher, would
yeah.
this just be on transcripts? This won't be like an endorsement on the diploma?
The requirement from the state of South Dakota is that it is listed on the transcript. We could choose to do things differently if we wanted to do that. I think it would be, as we've talked through our pathways and other groups, I think that if we don't give our students time and the ability to create their 4-year plan with that in mind, it becomes more difficult for us to, or for them to, how exactly is that going to look? How is that going to be celebrated? How is that going to be announced and communicated? And so those are some things that we're still working on. That's not done. But because of that, I will be presenting these graduation requirements. And it is possible and very likely that it will, the goal is to allow for flexibility in the graduation requirements, which may end up in a reduction or a change in some of the things that we've been doing here in Brookings. And so that's just a thought. You'll be seeing some more on that in the next month. Lastly, and this is where I had a couple phone calls today. I believe an email came to the board and was forwarded to Dr. Jensen and me, and I was able to have a conversation with a parent, and I think there were some questions. Of all the things that we're talking about, I believe the modified block schedule is the one that people feel will affect them the most. And I guess I can't argue that is the case. But it again, as I said at the beginning, it created a situation where the what comes in front of the why. And hopefully people can take a look at some of the things that this might help us affect positively. I'll start with a common misconception. When we say block schedule, what does it mean? Some people believe that a block schedule means that you take a quarter of school and that would count as a semester of the classes that you were in. So instead of taking 7 classes in a day, or in a semester, for example, you'd take 4, and those 4 classes would meet daily for a longer period of time, and you'd be done with classes sooner. That is not the case. That we are looking at that as a block schedule for us. We're talking about a modified block schedule. So students would still have 7 periods, and we would have those, and so a semester class would still take 1 semester to complete. A year-long class would still take 1 year to complete, but there would be fewer periods during the week, the longer periods of time. One of the things that we're trying to find, if you remember, was that intervention time. We needed more time during our day. And so if you sweep all of the passing time, that time that exists between period 2 and 3, and period 3 and 4, and 4 and 5, and 5 and 6, when you have 7 periods in a day, you have 6 passing times. When you have 4 periods in a day, you have 3. You just earned 15 minutes of time in your day. And that is something that we wanted to capitalize on. If you add to that our drop everything and read time that we've been doing for some time, that creates even more time that we can move forward into truly academic time and or intervention time. And that was our goal. So it does allow for dedicated intervention time during the school day for groups and individuals, Tuesdays and Fridays. I believe that will have a significant impact on our students and our achievement levels at the high school. I'm excited about what that's going to look like, how that's going to be functioning with our students. And with that, I will offer
I have a
questions.
question, I don't know if you can answer it, but if you go to modified block, will there not have to be some negotiating with the BEA on the way the verbiage is on the day?
I believe that is accurate, yes.
Okay.
We talk about periods, and we might need to talk about length of time or other factors.
There'll be questions on, planning time versus, new versus old, that type of thing.
In our overall master agreement, I think that's a recognized opportunity for some improvement because we have a basis of minutes, but then we refer to periods, and if there's a shift in period lengths, then it doesn't necessarily correspond. So we need to look at how we can reframe that all in terms of minutes. That's a good question.
I have one question. I know yesterday Dr. Willard and I had an opportunity to speak to the Brookings leadership group and many representatives from business and industry that were there. And they are excited about having students and have had students from Brookings High School there for apprenticeships and internships. And I would hope that the block schedule might open up a time frame that's more beneficial to those students as well. Would that not be correct?
Definitely. A student with a block schedule could take a 1-period internship and have some extended time. One of the things that a block does for a school and a classroom is it reduces the number of times you have to start and stop. And I think we know that the starting and stopping is costly. And so the first 5, last 5 and if you have more of them, you have more first 5s and more last 5s. So a longer period will allow for maybe an in-town field trip. Maybe it will help our lab classes and our anything you have to set up and tear down will allow for more time on task. There's no doubt that if, and I don't know if we have any on staff, but if you were a teacher that lectured for 50 minutes a day and tried to bring that over into a block situation, good luck to everyone in that situation. So certainly not what we envision. The research that we've seen, the things that I have read indicate that it is a transition is necessary at least 3 times throughout that period. Some activity, some hands-on, the ability for students to dive a little deeper into something that was just introduced is there. And it is varied. So some days, like on a Wednesday, are shorter than the Monday, Tuesday, or the Thursday, Friday. So there's a variety of lengths of time for our students and staff.
And I'm assuming there'll be some professional development to help teachers prepare for that.
There will be, yes.
I think there was another part of the letter around communication, and so my question is, whether you're a parent of an eighth grader and they have no experience at high school, or whether you're a high school pro parent, what is our plan to roll out this information so that they're aware and kind of know what's going on? Because, from the 30,000-foot view, these are three very large things, and so do we have a plan or strategy on how to bring everyone up to speed?
Thank you. Yes. Like I said, ideally you start with the why, and then you share that information, and then come up with and here's the what. And because of our need to start a conversation with registration, some of the what came out before the why. This is the ideal place, I think, to say here. These are things we're strongly considering. The process here to clean up the details is not Dr. Jensen and I around a table saying, here's what we're going to do. And so I think as we get closer to the details on the ground, our footprint gets larger, including more and more people. And I think that there are those who would, and I understand why they would say that, think this is just thrown at us, what's going on. And I hope that they will, call if they have any questions, ask if they have concerns, but also be open to providing some input when that comes. To speak to your timeline question, it is my goal to find this link, attach it to an email that will go out to all Brookings High School parents, students, so they can watch and know the why and see the what, and then maybe have some questions or input that would be really valuable for us.
Who's been involved with the process on the modified block? What kind of group did you have put together?
Great question. We've got, that is a conversation that really is a structural rebuild conversation. It's an MCL piece, but we took that to include a lot of other things. And realistically, what happened was as we were going down the path of MCL or the structural rebuild and pathways, we realized that we were walking down that almost the same path. And so we had multiple meetings separate, and we had multiple meetings together. And so the Pathways group started with community members, staff, and students. And then as we got that input, we walked with that toward the structural rebuild, which has been primarily staff members, thinking about what are we doing in the classroom, how are we doing, how does what we do affect our students on that regular basis. And then, so realistically, I would say it's that structural rebuild piece that leads us to some of the learner agency that we're looking for. So that piece of, we want students to take ownership of their learning and then run with it. If we can engage students with the careers and the pathways and why is this important to me? Well, let's look at how that works in your chosen career. If we can talk about that engagement, that learner agency, and invite students to choose wisely during their intervention time. We're here, there's some availability. If you do, great. If you don't, well, we're going to call you in. And that's a question too. I know that there are some great softwares out there that we will be implementing or would be implementing as we move forward down this path that would allow students to see a teacher's schedule, not probably what they're exactly doing, but what's open, and schedule themselves in, or to have our teachers look through their daily journals and find those students that need that extra help and pull them in with a requirement to be in that classroom at that time. And so opening that door a little bit, that speaks to that freedom and responsibility. I believe that allows our students to make the choice, but if you're not making the right choice, we're gonna help you down that path. Well, we amalgamated a little bit of that as we got further. The structural rebuild is an MCL group, or started that way. But as we went down that path, we realized that they're not separate conversations. when you really look at that MCL instruction, it is, the best parts of how do we help individual students get to where they need to be.
Okay,
And those pieces all came
That
together.
makes it clearer for me. That was kind of mixed up on that. Thank you.
Said something that intrigued me. I'm kind of trying to catch up here. What caused the calls today?
Block scheduling was the question. I think, and as I spoke with.
And why did the calls come in today?
Good one. Well, I think that it was because of the registration piece. As we registered or had registration meetings with 8th grade students and talked to parents. And so when we kind of threw out that idea that, there's more information coming, but here it is, this is what we're considering, and how do you, so is the chicken egg? There was a need to share with them some information about what might be the case for your student, for your
And those
school.
conferences took place yesterday?
It was
or
a
Monday?
large group meeting with parents on Monday night, and that followed a full day for our counselors to be in classrooms with middle school counselors and high school counselors talking to 8th graders. So there are some questions, and there's a buzz right now about that because of the timing. And I get it, I understand. So I'm just hopeful people will watch this and get some questions answered.
I wonder if we might utilize our website similarly to how we've done MCL and even the construction project at the middle school to have it available when people are kind of self-seeking that additional information, but
Thank you. Yeah, great.
I appreciated hearing you say how they are complementary to each other and the overlap you started seeing as you were working through that. So I think that's helpful as well to hear.
Thank you. Yeah, that was a powerful piece when we realized, wow, look at all this. It just seemed to be harmonious with some of the other pieces that were just kind of coming forward. And the timing was ideal, especially with that comprehensive needs assessment. Thank you for your attention. I will pass this over to Dr. Jensen.
I think we played in musical chairs, and now we're ready to go. Thanks for having us come today. This time is very much appreciated, so thank you. So this is a presentation about a possible alternative school option at Brookings High School. I'll talk a little bit about the name, Brookings Area Learning and Career Center. So if this is something that moves forward, there's kind of a reason behind some of that. So when thinking about the why for this particular need, the mission statement is read at every board meeting. The Brookings School District prepares all learners to be confident, engaged citizens empowered to impact the ever-changing and interconnected world. We do believe that we could and should do a better job preparing all learners. There are definitely some learners that it's not that we aren't trying, but I think we could do better. So how can we accomplish this? Paul talked a little bit about that. Schools that we have visited, the ones that we want to be when we grow up. So we've talked about that several times when we visited some schools. They really do have alternative schools. And if we ask them, how do you handle this situation? Well, we have alternative schools. If this isn't quite a match for them, then we have other schools. And so I think we are at that point. I think we're big enough. I think we have come to a point where we have determined quite a large group of students that what we have going on right now just really isn't working for them. So when we're looking at the alternative school in general, what about it? Why do we need it? So a student who has difficulty learning in a traditional setting, that might be one reason why we need an alternative school. A student needs more support and guidance. a student is not engaged, so maybe they're not challenged, so it could be that situation, or the content is not delivered at the student's level or pace. And I think that is the biggest one, is that I think so many of our students are, they're trying to keep up with the class, but that's just not really where they're at. And so my heart really does bleed for them, because I know that it is overwhelming. And then when you are overwhelmed, well, then you're really not engaged. And so I think we could do a better job at meeting them at where they're at. A student has social, mental health, or emotional needs. We have a lot of kids who are really hurting right now. And sometimes being in a school with 960 students in it is just not working for them. We have several students who have left us to go to Chester Online, because that's kind of where they're at, that our school is it's too big, it's too loud, it's too whatever it is, fill in the blank. Also, BHS requires a higher level of compliance, and sometimes students have difficulty following the rules. And so some things that we're seeing is just wanderers with head down, not prepared for class, so then there's late work, or sometimes we have students who just simply don't bring any supplies. They come to class, but they don't even have a pencil with them. Missed consequences, etc. So, and some of these kiddos are ones that they are hurting significantly. And so we just aren't meeting their needs. Just some data to share here. How many students did not move on to the next grade? And so what that means is at the beginning, so they've gone a year through school, and so freshmen who didn't go to sophomore status, and as you can see, there's 3 years here listed. And so that's a pretty common number, that typically there's about 30 to 35, 37-ish students who don't reach freshman or sophomore status, which means they don't have 5.5 credits. And then the same goes for sophomore to junior. It's a little less there, but it's still really, I feel like, a significant number. And if you come from a place that we come from, which is we are trying to determine how to best come up with how many teachers do we need, what do those class sizes look like? Well, as you can see, if there's 30 kids, that is a little more than a class. And so it is at times hard to kind of guess with our data that kind of moves up and down with registration numbers on how many teachers that we need. And so junior to senior status, it is a little less. So we definitely see kids kind of catching up more, and by the time they're seniors, you can definitely tell that some of these kiddos are probably in credit recovery, and so they get to catch up before they get to their senior year. So that program obviously is helping some students get to senior status on time. But I still don't like seeing 17 kids going from junior to senior year that are not there yet. So we can do a better job with that. Here's some information on our first quarter failed grades. So this is our current school year right now. So in 9th grade, we had 82 failed grades, and that consisted of 44 students. In 10th grade, we had 60 failed grades, and that was 40 students. In 11th, we had 41 failed grades, and that's 31 students. And 12th, 39, and 26 students. So there were 222 total Fs in first quarter. We can definitely do better than that. That's a lot of failed grades, and that's a lot of hard work on a student's part. If they don't have a passing grade first quarter, they have to work really hard to get a passing grade, a higher passing grade, so that they can pass the semester. And otherwise, then it's repeating that class. Here's just some data, just some truancy from consequences. So that means that they did something that was against our policy and they were given a consequence. So that be detentions or block detentions. So in this current school year right now, we've had 563 truancies from detentions, and 97 students have made that 563. And then last year, we had 980 total. So looking at our numbers right now, we probably will go over that. And that was 155 students. So that gives you a little bit of information on the truancies from consequences. So what will the alternative school potentially look like? It will definitely have smaller class sizes. It would be a smaller school. We would have a consistent team, which means your English teacher would be your English teacher for 4 years. And I think that that is so important for kids that don't necessarily adjust well going from semester to semester and year to year. A flexible schedule. I think some of our students just do not handle a full day well, especially our students who they wear out. Some of our students with significant anxiety, they are working hard to keep it together all day. So, we've talked about just adjusting that school day a little bit. A wider variety of teaching methods. And, when you don't have so many kids, you can do so many different things. I'm just thinking, gallery walks and so many of those fun things. We can do a lot of that stuff when we have smaller class sizes and non-traditional evaluation methods. So, do we have to have a test after every unit? Probably not. That probably isn't something that we would see in this school. And of course, increased supervision and support. And I think that's what our kids are looking for, asking for, needing. The idea is that every person that would be in that building, so every adult, would be trained in the Boys Town model. So we would be consistently using the same language when it comes to any redirection. And then it would be a highly structured environment. And I think that our kids, some of our kids are really asking for that too. This program would focus on the whole child, so it would be individual plans, career focused, and just having that ability to address individual social, mental health, and emotional needs, and hopefully on real time. Because I know we have 3.5 counselors for 960 people right now we're registering, and so having them available right away when someone is needing something might not always happen. And so in this case, we would hope that with the smaller class sizes and the numbers that we would be able to provide that for our students. And we feel like it's necessary. So just some thoughts on how they would qualify. So students who would have chronic truancy, continual academic failure. I think if a student has one failed grade, does that make them eligible for an alternative school? Maybe not. Maybe it was just a tough time for them, but frequent non-compliance is something too. And I think that Dr. Von Fisher and I have talked about if you do something that breaks policy and you follow through with the consequence, then that's great. Good job. But we are seeing, you are doing the crime, but you're not doing the time. And so that's the part that we need to start seeing more of. Another qualification maybe could be pregnancy or teen parenthood, mental health that we've already talked about, administrator referral, and then the teacher assistance teams referral. I think I have had 12 teacher assistance teams referrals just this year at the high school. And so that's a lot, and that's telling us how many students are really suffering in classes and struggling. And many of them are freshmen. So I feel like the freshman teachers just have a morning schedule with me probably twice a week. They just come, we just meet. And so, and it's a good team. I feel like it's our teaming time too. But I'm just wondering if our students were met where their needs are, would we need to have so many of these? Just some thoughts on funding. I would hope that we could work with some area schools on offering some spots tuition-based, where they could come in and enroll their students in our school. And right now, many Brookings School District high school students are open enrolled to area schools. We talked about some of our kiddos are going to Chester. And, as much as I hate to see them go, I understand why they do, because we are not meeting their needs. So they are going where needs are being met. And so I would love to have them back, because I miss every single one of them that have been gone. And so this would be a great way to maybe get some of our kiddos back. And then our goal is to limit additional general fund costs for this program. So what does that mean? Well, we will very likely increase BHS the core classes. We don't really know how we would pay for this program without increasing class sizes. We will very likely have to decrease BHS elective classes, because we probably won't be able to offer classes that are small electives, because we will need teachers in other areas. And then there could be some additional costs for online electives. So our teachers would likely offer an elective, because they would teach 5 just like they do currently. But we know that they can't cover all the electives. So the students would graduate with the same number of credits that everyone else does, and they would have a high school diploma just like everyone else does. So those are some things that we definitely wouldn't be able to provide. So just looking at who is on the team, so we would need a full-time English teacher, math teacher, social science teacher, science teacher, SPED teacher, a counselor, assistant principal, and an SRO. We have had some alternative learning at our school before. I think some of the differences is we haven't felt like we have always been able to have the alternative school that we really want and that we really see as beneficial. And this, I feel like, would get us there. This would get us to what we really need. And we need a principal who is monitoring the progress and being that support system to the teachers. And so that is one area that Dr. Von Fisher and I are a little concerned about. If you pull me out of Brookings High School, then what will that look like for the high school then? So that is a piece that we definitely have been talking about. So that is the alternative school in a kind of a nutshell without a whole lot of details. We're at a position right now where it's hard to keep planning when we don't really know where the school board's at on this. And so this is a good time to kind of discuss this with you guys and figure out what your thoughts are on an alternative school. Yeah.
Would there be potential for a student who's in the alternative school to take, for example, a career technical education courses where they're often more comfortable and more successful because it's a hands-on type of learning? At least from my experience, that's what I've seen. Sometimes a student who's very challenging in English class might come to a class where it's more hands-on and they are more engaged. Would there be an opportunity for them to do that? And, sort of on a trial basis, if things were successful, they could continue in that class and then go back for their core academics in the alternative school?
In previous times, the alternative schedule didn't match up, real great. And then the high school would be block schedule, and the alternative school probably wouldn't be, because there wouldn't be that. I think the alternative school would benefit from having that daily consistency. So that would be the only thing that I would say. I would say, the name of the school obviously is Learning First and Career Second, right? But this will be a career-focused place. We will be bringing in a lot of different partners, and especially with, and we already have started kind of that cooperation in years past with our previous alternative school with the Department of Labor and places like that. So they will have a lot of opportunity for internships, and especially junior and senior year. So I think they will get their hands dirty. without maybe going into the classes that we currently have.
And I do know that when we had our previous alternative school, that some of the teacher education students from the university came down and offered a course. Wasn't just like a 9-week course, but, a few times a week, they might come and do some of these activities with them too, which also could be a possibility that we could work out.
That would be great.
Yeah,
And I
have-
think it's a good opportunity for them too.
it is. It really is a good opportunity. I know the students that I worked that did that, they really enjoyed it. They really enjoyed it.
I have a comment. First of all, thanks for the statistics. It's kind of eye-opening, mind-boggling, kind of scary that we have these kids out there that are floundering. I want you to know that I support, the direction you're headed 1,000%. There's a lot of details to be worked out. The biggest one I see is the financing of it. And I just got a couple questions and kind of all rolls together. Have you thought about how many students might be in it? And would that make a difference if you pull 40 kids out of the high school? Can you reduce the staff there and maybe fund a little bit over here? And then a big question for me is, where would it be at?
Well, if anyone wants to donate, I am all ears. Dr. Von Fisher and I had the opportunity to go look at a building, and it's the old Family Dollar store, and it is fabulous. But we know that we don't have the capital outlay funds for that. So I brought my feet back down to earth, and we started looking at our own building. So we have in the past, we've had the alternative school over at the CTE building, and we think that we can make that work. So what we're looking at, so for numbers, we were thinking top end 100. And of course, I would say I don't want to quit until we have everyone's needs met. So if we are at a point where we need 110, well, then that's how big the alternative school will be. But we are thinking to begin with probably 80. And so I think what will happen is the freshman class will come in, and we will want them to start out at the high school. So the freshman class would be small at the alternative school. But we probably knew after maybe 2 or 3 weeks if a student was struggling. Well, before, we would have a TAP meeting, and then we would start with the accommodations and kind of go down that path, and then do they need special education, so then there's a referral. And by the time they kind of get all tested and things, we're into a quarter, and they maybe have failed everything by then. In this way, every student is having really an individual plan. So we're planning on kind of working more with LOs and so instead of looking at the courses, which we will because we're a high school, but we really want to kind of modify MCL maybe a little bit and really provide an opportunity for, our teachers to be trainers for our high school teachers when MCL comes to the high school, which, by the way, I'm super excited for those 6th graders to get there. So I think it's a great opportunity for our teachers to learn a new craft, a new trade, which is, that's exciting to me. And I think it's important to meet our learners where they're at. And some of our learners are not at all where they are at currently in their classroom. And there's a reason why they are having behaviors and maybe showing frustration. I can understand that. I probably would be frustrated too. So to answer your question, probably about 100 or so. So yes, we definitely can if you're taking 20, but the problem is that 20, those 20 is not necessarily going to cover all of the kids that the student or that the teachers see in a day. And so we have talked about maybe giving an overage to some of the teachers that go over there so that maybe they could pick up a class or maybe 2 and either teach it online or teach it over there. They'll definitely probably have last period of the day where they could scoot over there. So we have talked a little bit about how we can cover that. I'll be honest with you, it'll be tight. It's gonna be, if we do it apples to apples and we're not spending any more money, it's gonna be tight.
Looking at about 10% then, if you're looking at 100 kids.
right?
Thank you.
The other question, another question I have is students could move in and out in some, like, I'm just thinking like the student that's a pregnancy or teen parenthood may have been fine in Brookings High School, and then all of a sudden, because of added responsibilities with a pregnancy or a teen parent, as a teen parent, may need that smaller, more flexible scheduling maybe that they would have at the alternative school. So then they could then move to the transfer to the alternative school.
Absolutely. What is awesome about this is we don't have to wait for semester time to come before
Right.
we did, because we didn't want, it was no different than if a student wants to, say, move into a different class the third week in the quarter. Well, oof, you've missed a lot already. The way the alternative school will be run is we're going wherever they are. And so, yep, so that wouldn't matter. They could come in whenever. So that is a big adjustment or a change that we have made that I think would be a positive change.
And then I go back to those are the students that I think would need like a child development class, that kind of thing, which could be an online course too, that they could take.
Yes, and we have we've been working with Edgenuity for our online classes that we just started, like maybe end of September. And they have opportunities where they have the curriculum already established, and then our teachers could teach it. And so I find that as being just wonderful. And so we could, I think, do some nice things. And they have wonderful electives. They have so many that I wouldn't have imagined that they would have. Yes, they have like a crime one, and they have, it is amazing what they have.
One more question. When we get closer to adopting this, is there a school within 4 or 5 hours that we could go see that has one of these so we know what it looks like?
There's a really good one in Florida.
I'm going to be in Alabama. Maybe I'll just drive
Yeah,
down
just
there.
hop over there, right?
All right.
Teachwell is a great school. I think it would be run much different than this one would be, though. I don't know of any MCL sort of alternative schools. I think that would be a new thing for our area. So, but I think Teachwell would be a really good school to just go look at as far as alternative goes.
I just wanted to say that I strongly agree with you with regard to the commitment to all learners. And this whole thing does bother me. I worry about maybe some more numbers, looking in a little deeper, the context. For example, it looks to me like 15% of the students in the high school got a failing grade somewhere along the line, according to these statistics, and that doesn't trouble me. And you have 222 Fs in the first quarter. I'd be interested in knowing how many, in the context of how many grades were handed out. That's what I'm trying to say. You know, I mean, it is really sobering, and so I favor a deeper dive to the extent that you have the resources to do more research, do more looking, and so on and so forth. You try to find a solution, because this is where, you know, Paul, I don't disrespect at all what you said an hour ago about our ACT average and so on and so forth. But that's a certain type of person that we're monitoring, and we're at least where we should be. You know, I'm in favor of that. But then at the same time, we have to sit there and look at these 15% of the students, and it just makes me really uncomfortable. One other thought, now it escaped me. Maybe we'll come back. Go ahead, Clint.
Yeah, just, you know, it's interesting when we start talking about this, because we certainly feel the educational calling to do what we need to do per our mission statement, per our profession, to serve all students and to address the needs that we see here. I think there's also a broader community conversation around this economically. We look at our community and what we're sub 2% unemployment. We know that the workforce demands and needs are continuing to evolve, and the needs and the requirements to have an educated workforce are ever growing, and we know that if we aren't successful here, somewhere these students have to find success. So when we start looking at providing for these opportunities, I think it's really important that this isn't just a social argument. There's also a very strong economic argument as well. And I think that's one of the things that, while it wasn't stated explicitly, it's certainly something that can be inferred from the presentation as we look at this data. And I really applaud Paul and Shelley for you leaning into the data. I know I challenged you to start looking at this, putting it on your data wall, because when you start looking at data, it forces you to ask really good questions. And I think you've asked some fabulous questions of yourself, of your staff members, to really start probing deeply into what you said just a minute ago, which is, what do we want to be when we grow up? And I think that's a fabulous question to ask, because by no means has our school system arrived. We know that we still have work to do. And again, I applaud you and all the teachers behind you, because this isn't work that you've done on your own. There's a whole line of teachers behind you that have made this possible. So this is really compelling information, so thank you.
I'm still noodling on a lot of this, but one question I had was the Boys Town model. I'm just not as familiar with it, but you talked about all the staff being trained in that. What kind of a time commitment is that? What all is involved in that type of a training?
We have one of our staff members is actually trained to be a trainer. And so in talking with Wendy, she explained that, maybe it would be good if we had a consistent model to follow. And so she had mentioned it actually to me, and that's how it came about. And I thought that was a fabulous idea to have the same consistent responses to, and I think it mostly, I have not been trained in it either, so I'm probably not a great person to ask specifics on the Boys Town model, but it's consistent, the same exact answers to non-compliant behaviors. When we're going through this presentation, thank you for all the work you put into it. It's clear that a lot of thought and intention went into it. There's a couple trigger words in there, like increasing class size and decreasing elective offerings. Oh, no. Decreasing elective class size. Is that the offering itself, or is that the size of the class? The offering itself, yes. Yeah, potentially. It could be both, yeah.
Right.
It would be like if a class did not have a certain level of enrollment, you might have to
Right.
consider not offering that class.
Right. So I appreciate you outlining all of those, even though they definitely put your antenna up a little bit when you start hearing them. But I also, when you look through all the information that is so compelling about this portion of our student population that just so desperately needs this additional level of support, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I'm very much in favor of supporting you to continue to move on to the next step of what this looks like. I don't know what that next step is, but I think this is all, I think you did an incredible job. So thank you for presenting it.
I just have one other added comment. Did either one of you or both of you see Paper Tigers, the film that was shown last year? It was shown on campus by the SNEA, the student group, and it dealt with an alternative school. And it was all children in this alternative school that had adverse childhood experiences, ACEs. And it was incredible, the difference you saw in those students and the relationships they developed with teachers. And it doesn't come without struggles and challenges. I mean, there were days when they were angry with the teacher, and then, it takes a special person sometimes with that. But it was just incredible when they had their graduation and how thrilled those students, those teachers, the parents were that those children were finishing high school and had built a relationship with those teachers. So I would encourage you to see that. I think it's available online. We happened to see it in the, rotunda. I just
There's one that's on Netflix, and I wonder if it's
It might be
maybe
the same one.
but
It's
just
a
called
school
something
in
different.
Washington,
The
the state of Washington,
the
but it
one
was a
that I was
community about
seeing-
our size.
The one that I saw, I think it was based in California, and it is so good. I
Yeah.
recommend anyone to watch it too. It's on Netflix, and it is so good.
Do
And
you remember the name of that one, Jill? You know?
I will send it to you. I
Walla
can't.
Walla, Washington was, I remember that because that name was so unusual, but Walla Walla, Washington was the community where the Paper Tigers was filmed.
And one more reference point of that, because I did have the opportunity to view that film as well, and it speaks to the importance of the support network, because even when the students achieve a level of success, because it's a relatively speaking foreign concept to them, how they reacted when they had success. And in there, I can remember the story of a young man that all of a sudden started having some academic success, and success started breeding more success, and now we're going to go apply for college, and boy, you've been admitted to college, and it was a complete reversal of, oh my gosh, now what am I going to do? Didn't know how to handle that. So again, it's pretty fascinating when you think about all those elements of success and supports to get there, and then once they achieve it, the supports to continue to capitalize on that. So yeah, I think it's a worthy film that doesn't take a long time. Might be worth showing to the entire high school staff at some point in time. Paper Tigers.
One that I have seen in Florida, they actually won't let the students move on unless they have a job lined up or are going to a university or a VOTEC. And they just want to keep having them take classes or encourage them until they actually can kind of let them go into a successful place. And so I think if we take bits and pieces from places that we know and use here, I think that could be a really successful thing for our students and maybe some neighboring district students.
One more question. On your slide about who is on the team, when we're talking about SROs, today we do some splitting of time between the other buildings. Would it be accurate to assume we would want an SRO more full-time, or would we continue to, you think we would still be splitting time, or do you have any thoughts on that?
I think that Josh would probably have the same amount of time, but I am guessing he would be wandering across the street maybe a little bit more than he does right now. So I don't, my hope is that when you provide an opportunity for a student that is at their comfort level and meet them where they are academically, we might not see as many things happening as we do right now. I think so much of some of the things that go on is really due to them being uncomfortable or they're leaving someplace where they don't really want to be or feel comfortable. And so I really feel like the behaviors, and behaviors don't mean we have great kids. So it's not like behaviors are, they're walking around with inappropriate objects, so it's not like that. But I think it's just sometimes the verbal and a little bit of acting out. And I'm just hopeful that I have such a big heart for alternative learning, and it's my pie in the sky job is that. That is exactly where I would want to be, and because they right now they maybe don't have the voice support at their home that can help them be more successful in school, and so I'm hoping that we can be their voice for them. So
this list of staff on who is on the team isn't necessarily additional, and like we talked about, it might be utilizing other staff already. Okay.
absolutely.
Thank you. Just wanted to clarify that when we're talking about kind of the head count there.
Well, I guess as far as I'm concerned, I'm not, as a non-educator, best way to describe me today right now is I'm just kind of reeling with this information. I mean, to me, it's a little bit like what Chad brought to us here, a year and a half ago, and he saw how disengaged so many of our high school students were towards being part of the community, blah, blah, or part of the school and blah, 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 blah. And Clint, I'd sure like to see us not accept this as a report and then go on to something else. I think what we need to do is accept this as a report and make a commitment that we put enough resources, at least in the way of thinking about it, that we maybe have some alternatives that we can consider. I mean, there's just so much stuff, and these are just a half a dozen slides or so. I mean, but there are things in there. You look at the number, going back to the failures, going back to 222 Fs in the first quarter. Well, the first thing that comes to my mind is, well, how many of those could we prevented if we had the resources and if we had the intent to try to cut them off the path? And then how many does that mean that won't end up in the alternative school, whatever gets named, you know? So, I mean, there are all kinds of dimensions to this thing, and ultimately, you're right, Shelley, there are resources out here who would consider support in this sort of area, and the reason for that is it's probably not the school board's primary goal, but it certainly is one of the many interests that the community has, and that is it's an economic issue. And that's why people will respond to it if it's presented well and if it's a good plan.
And we've started to commit to looking at some trend data as much as the snapshot data, and I know that Shelley and Paul have gathered some of that trend data because, again, a snapshot can be deceiving. It's really trends over time that create and help illuminate what's happening. And I think we have some of that trend data, so I do envision that we'll bring more of that trend information along with further conversations about the plan. And I think in terms of space, because somebody might be viewing this and saying, well, how did we magically all of a sudden have space? Well, again, one of the things that was part of our master comprehensive facility plan, this is how everything ties together, we had created very intentionally the wellness space that we had defined for staff now at the middle school, so it did free up space on the high school campus within that former multi-district building. So we do have, again, by design, some of those things put in place, and it gives us the opportunity to leverage that space and utilize it. And it may be a place where that's where we start, and then from there we look a little more deeply into the community to see what else we might be able to do. But I agree with what you're saying, Van, and I think there's going to be more to come.
Any other comments? Sobering afternoon.
Just-
I really
Yeah,
appreciate
and
it.
thank you to both of you.
You
for-
want us to
Get out of
leave
here
now?
Again, thank you both.
Okay, do you want to take over on the schedule, Clint?
Yeah, again, just in terms of our cadence of what we've started doing a few years ago was creating, we drafted 2 calendars, and then we're always a couple of years in advance of what the new calendar will be. You do notice, however, what's here, and this will be presented for board action at the regular February meeting, but again, this is information because we know so much hinges in our community on what the school calendar will be, and what you see in front of you are 2 items. First of all, Amanda, if we could pull up the draft modified 2020-21 calendar. We had actually, if you look at the upper right-hand corner of that on your own screen, you'll notice that that was approved in February of 2019. And you may wonder, well, why are we presenting a modification of this calendar at this time? Well, one of the things that we received feedback on through our staff satisfaction survey that we had done over the last year was ask the question about spring conferences. And typically the spring conference was something that was there, and there was really a mixed bag of emotions about and thoughts about whether or not we should have spring conferences or not. And as our calendar committee met, we looked at that data, we talked about the feedback that the committee had received, and it was a committee representing administrators and staff members from all buildings within the district. We also had support staff information and district administrator information from like our director of activities and our director of transportation that helped weave this all together. And the feedback was that from the K-5 level, there's a real compelling need to have those spring conferences, having that additional touch with parents, the opportunity to have some interface time with them. And that's what you'll notice as you look at the latter part of this calendar, that this would provide an opportunity for the K-5 students to have their conference times, and then the middle school and high school would not have conference. They would have school as usual, so there would actually be one day where teachers from the K-5 level would receive a comp day, and the middle school and high school staff would be in school. There was questions on whether or not that would create some issues. The consensus was that we would still provide transportation on those days, so if parents needed to get a child to the club or to Gap or something like that, that we could provide for that transportation service even though students wouldn't be in school that day. And then at the same time, we would work with those community partners to inform them of our intent not to have school for the K-5 students. This is just in proposal mode right now. This is an opportunity for people to give comment and feedback on it. Our team thought it was really sound that this would work, really providing for that differentiation, if you will, in terms of those experiences, because the engagement of parents, middle school and high school in particular, and conferences is very low at best. So there wasn't a lot of value-added time from the perspective of our high school and middle school staff regarding those conferences times in the spring, but K-5 found that there was a tremendous amount of value in reinstating those. So that's the modified calendar. And then if we want to look at the next calendar for what was developed for the, and believe me, it gets to be a mouthful when you start talking 2021, 2022. It's not as easy as the 18-19 calendar. But what you see with that one reflects, again, much the same intent that we would have those spring conferences for K-5. We would maintain that we would have the school in session for the middle school and high school. This calendar, one of the feedback pieces that came, and I understand I have a really compelling paper coming from a third grader here at Dakota Prairie about needing to have a longer break and not coming back so quick in terms of the Christmas break. So a persuasive paper, I understand, so I'll be happy to share that with the board when that comes as well. But the feedback was that it's nicer to have that break consistent with some of our major employers in town. And you'll notice that works out quite well in December. When you look at the 17th, it would be a noon dismissal because it's consistent with when the Bell Debate Tournament is hosted, and then returning back to school January 3rd. And we still are out in ample time as you look at the end of May to afford for a few days of snow, if indeed that's the case. Hopefully it's not, but we always have to be mindful that could very well be because we live in South Dakota. And consistently, as you see across the calendar, those days that we've taken off historically the last couple of years, extending the Thanksgiving break with that Wednesday as well. So just for discussion right now and information for the board, knowing that community members may have some feedback, but we did try to be considerate of our major employers, the university as well, and then the feedback that we received from staff as we developed these two plans. I don't know if anybody, we have a couple of people that were part of this, if they want to add anything, but.
I just have one comment, and that's on the modified, or the 2021 calendar that's been approved already. First semester is 92 days, and second semester is 82 days, so there's 10 days difference. And you could actually be done with school before Christmas and just swap those days around, 92 and 82, and that way, the kids would be done at Christmas, your high school could give their semester test and be out of there. And I'm not sure, the next year it doesn't work because the next year you have it pretty equal, 89 and 85. But this year it's 82, And I think, wow, that's pretty neat. It could end at Christmas time and not losing anything. But you maybe miss more school, I don't know, the first part of the year, second part of the year, so. Just an observation.
Yeah, it's an interesting point of feedback. Yeah.
This is a stupid question, ECE-5 is K through 5?
Well, early childhood, because we do have the early childhood program within the Dakota Prairie building.
Okay, as a parent, I'm not sure I would know I should go to that with ECE-5.
Gotcha.
So maybe we
Communication.
layman terms that down a little bit. Thank you.
Very good.
Any other comments? Okay, well, thank you very much. Now I accept a motion to enter into executive session pursuant to SDCL 1-25-2 subsection 1 personnel.
I so move.
Second.
Oh, all right, motion carries, and so I'll declare us in executive or heading for executive? Heading for executive, and we will not have anything coming out. Will you close these down, Amanda, or? Thank you.